What would you say constitutes your Sangha?
There are lots of sanghas that I'm a part of. I
Okay.
guess primarily the one that I would use the term sangha for is my Zen sangha, and that is comprised of the people that I go to roughly once a week, and I sit zazen with them, and we talk a little bit about the Dharma, we talk a little bit about our other practices, and then there might be some social events involved as well. Sometimes we go to the pub after we sit and discuss, and more recently, we've been looking at going on walks in the countryside together, and that's very nice. And so it's the community of people that I interact with that also have a Zen practice and that I see on a regular basis. And that's where I would typically use the term Sangha as well. I think, as I said, I'm a member of lots of different sanghas, and I guess another way that that particular term is used is to refer to all of the Buddhist practitioners all over the world.
Yeah.
And you might also want to expand the definition to include like every being that you practice with in any context or in any way.
Sure.
But I'm not sure that I would use the term Sangha for that necessarily.
Well, you also use the word my Sangha. And so I'm interested in why the one that is local to you is the one you would refer to as yours. How long has that relationship been there? And how long have you considered that your Sangha?
Sure. So maybe I should be clear for any people who are less familiar with my practice. When I say my Sangha, I certainly don't mean the one that I kind of lead in any respect.
Sure.
It's the Sangha that I am a part of and that I care for in some way. And so that's why I use the term my, not in some kind of ownership way, but just to refer to the one I care about, I guess.
Yeah.
I have been a member of the Sangha for around about 3 years. And I don't know at what point I decided that this was going to be the Sangha I practiced with regularly and for a long time. But it was the first Sangha I started practicing with, and it's really the only one that I've practiced with. I haven't kind of shopped around and experimented in any way. So I suppose pretty much straight away, as soon as I started practicing with them, I felt that it fit quite well with what I was doing. I liked the general atmosphere of the place. I like the people who go. I like the people who lead it. And so, yeah, I think pretty quickly I was comfortable calling it my Sangha.
Now that you have this relationship with the concept of Sangha, that I would say fits fairly well the conventional definition that someone who has never heard the word before might find if they search for it. Looking back to before 3 years ago, did you have any relationships that you would describe now as Sangha relationships, even if you wouldn't have then?
Yes. And I don't know that I want to like divulge the specifics of that.
Sure.
But I think the key part is almost like a hobby or a particular interest that binds you together. And that's, well, I don't quite know how to frame it. So maybe I can go on a little bit of a tangent.
Please
and say, a couple of weeks ago, I was discussing with my friends the topic of aliens and alien encounters and alien experiences. And it turns out that one of my friend's grandparents had an alien encounter a couple of decades ago. And I, among several of my old friends, were interested in kind of hearing about what did the aliens look like? What did they say? Where did they take him? Have they been back? Yeah, my friend wasn't really interested in going into those topics, and she was more interested in talking about the kind of strained relationship that she has had with her granddad ever since that experience that he'd had. Because every time she wants to interact with him, it turns out that he wants to talk about aliens, and that's very exhausting for her, and exhausting for the family as well. So any family occasion, he wants to derail whatever is being spoken about onto the topic of aliens. And as I was listening to this, I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if he had some kind of alien-based Sangha where he go and have this kind of shared intense interest in these kinds of topics, and maybe people who have had similar experiences. And so I certainly think that's part of what makes a Sangha, is having that shared interest and coming from maybe shared experiences, shared circumstances. But I think another important role of the alien Sangha would be like exposing this granddad to other people who have had the same experiences, so that he can see it's not necessarily so strange, unusual, or special that he has had these experiences. Actually, it turns out that there are lots of other people who are not only willing to listen to him talk about these things, but have also gone through similar things to him. And I think that's something he's lacking. And so Sangha for me is like any kind of container that protects maybe your family or the other containers that you have, or the rest of your life, from these particular interests or experiences that you've been through that you might not share with a lot of people in your life, but you do share with other people in your wider community.
That is a very nice structural explanation of the role of Sangha, but I wonder if you think there might be more in common between the specific interests in aliens and in Zen, as opposed to, and maybe this isn't an opposition, but maybe like a group who's into model trains might not be having quite the same experience as the alien Sangha or the Zen Sangha. And I wonder if you think that's true, and if so, what do you think is different about the weirder ones?
I don't know that model trains is necessarily a good example of something that is entirely normal, or something you can talk about with lots of people. I can very much imagine a granddad who will only talk to his grandchildren or other relatives about model trains, yes, and wanting to know the new set he has.
I probably have met that person.
But I think I understand what you mean, and I guess both with alien experiences, or maybe experiences that lead people to want to have a practice in Buddhism or in Zen, is that those experiences can maybe be quite othering for the individual who's going through them, if the culture doesn't have a way of dealing with those. But it can also be, as I said, like straining for the like interpersonal relationships you have with other people in your lives who might not have the experience to listen to you talk about those particular things in a way that they need to be heard sometimes.
You're being a very good Zen student in not creating any kind of duality of like realm of experience between the kinds of things that someone abducted by aliens or someone who has done a lot of Zen meditation might experience and someone who's playing with model trains might experience. But I still wonder whether there is a psychological difference that you might be able to point to between the kinds of experiences of intense interests that can be othering to people who haven't had the same experience versus sports, like more ordinary hobbies that other people have experienced and may simply not be interested in.
I guess I don't quite know what you mean by psychological. I guess with sports, I mean, it's not uncommon to talk with strangers about sports or people that you've just met in order to immediately bond with them.
Yes.
I don't think that you'd have that experience with model trains, aliens, or Zen necessarily. Mm-hmm. And so that might be something that makes it a little bit more difficult, but I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at.
It's not, but I love that you're stonewalling me. The thing that I'm getting at is that there is something indescribable at the heart of the experience of certain realms of human life. I'm deliberately not trying to create a category of spiritual experience that might be considered separate from ordinary human life here. But there are certain kinds of experiences, I feel, there are certain kinds of experiences where it isn't possible to have a conversation that gets at the experience with people who have not had such an experience. And that is the kind of thing that I have found in Sangha that I haven't been able to find anywhere else. And another piece of that, which I wonder, which I've talked to you about before, and so I wonder if this might help you get into it, is how in nominal Sangha spaces, like let's focus on the Zen Sangha space for specifics. There are lots of people in those spaces who are somewhere on the periphery of the experience that brings people into the room, who either have not had an indescribable experience doing the practice or have had mistaken perceptions about the experience or something. And it can lead to kind of circular and frustrating ways of trying to relate to one another on the periphery of the Sangha space, as opposed to the natural way of sitting silently together where no sort of discussion is necessary. Do you know what I'm talking about that, like, if you know kind of quality of Sangha? And do you accept that as a part of the definition?
Yeah, I think so. So certainly something that we see a lot at the Sangha, I would say it's anywhere between 25% to 50% of the people who come to the Sangha are maybe seeking these kinds of experiences rather than having already had them. And that creates maybe an interesting dynamic between those two groups of people. I don't know necessarily that the particular Sangha that I go to is set up in such a way to be very welcoming to the people who come seeking those kinds of experiences. And it can be tough, I think, being kind of regular member of these kinds of spaces, interacting with those kinds of people because of the fact that they often don't come back. So they might come once or twice and then you would never see them again. It takes quite a bit of energy to hear the experiences that they're seeking or what they've come for. That takes quite some time and energy to hear that, and then it's deflating to then never see them again. But it's also complex because, of course, as a member of the community, you want the community to be kind of thriving, healthy, new members joining. And so if lots of people are coming once or twice and then never coming back, maybe you start to feel, is there something that we're doing wrong? And I think more recently, I've kind of been thinking about the role of the Sangha actually being healthy for those kinds of people as well. The people who do come seeking, it's quite important actually that they come and maybe don't find the thing they're necessarily after. I don't know that those two things are compatible.
Do you think that this is a traditional approach or a revolutionary approach to be welcoming to seekers in the Zen tradition specifically? Or do you find, as I might disclose that I find, that the tradition in Zen is to not be welcoming to those who are seeking, to sort of create a high barrier to entry?
Yes. I mean, I don't have much historical knowledge of how Sanghas used to practice hundreds of years ago in different countries, but certainly I guess the stories that are passed down to us in Zen involve kind of leaving people sat outside the temple gates for weeks on end to demonstrate sincere interest or to go away. We have stories about Zen masters threatening or indeed sometimes actually cutting off people's limbs. And these kinds of stories presumably would have had this kind of deterring influence on people who were considering joining these kinds of communities. Now, I don't think the people who lead at my Sangha would take on board those kinds of forms, but they do take on an approach to the practice as though it were something mundane, in that actually we're not doing something special, and they kind of despise the word religion or despise the insinuation that we might be doing something spiritual. And I don't know the extent to which they truly feel that, or to which there's some kind of discouragement to the people who come necessarily seeking those kinds of experiences, because maybe they don't think our practice can offer those kinds of people much at all.
There's all kinds of translation issues and stuff there too, and cross-cultural migration of Buddhism from one culture to another and how that's all changed. But this is the space of Buddhist practice that I enjoy talking about the most, but I do also want to ask you about the internet, given that that's the sort of Dharma. I wouldn't use the word Sangha necessarily, but that's the Dharma environment in which you and I encountered each other, for example, and where we encountered a lot of the people who'll be listening to this conversation. So I just want to ask you how that part of your exploration of the Dharma went or has gone. Like, I'm not sure if you would even still consider it ongoing very much, and what the differences were like particularly once you really started to settle into in-person practice.
Sure. So I think I went onto the internet to maybe seek out other people who had been through similar things to me, or who could talk to me in terms that I could appreciate about the things that I was going through that I found difficult connecting with other people about. And I mean, that's how thankfully I met you, and that's what led to my Zen practice. And so as an entryway into Zen practice, it was invaluable. I don't think if it were not for these kind of less formal online spaces that I would have sought out this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I don't think, if I think back to the kind of person I was 5 years ago, that I would have necessarily gone looking for an in-person group to divulge my experiences with, or to seek co-practice with. That would have been something that was very difficult to me. So I think that's certainly something kind of online Sanghas can offer. Mm. I think Base is a very nice structure for online Sangha in that there is, again, I mean, I'm not an active poster on Base, but I do attend a lot of the online sits that we do. And it's a nice space because it's something that I feel like I can call mine in the same way I was referring to my in-person Sangha.
Yes. Love to hear that.
So it's not just a space that I'm kind of not caring about, right? Like now I really care about the people that I'm interacting with, and it's important that I kind of contribute to this space in some way rather than just exist in it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. As opposed to on, say, the website formerly known as Twitter, where these things sort of were constructed and destroyed over and over again constantly, and they may only last as long as a conversation.
Yes.
Did you find a lot of that public conversation about the Dharma? I mean, I don't know how much you participated in that really, but like, what did you think of all that, and how is it different from talking about it behind the closed doors of the meditation hall?
So I don't know that I participated in that many online discussions that I would call Dharma discussions. They were kind of discussions about the Dharma, and there's maybe some subtlety there that is actually quite important to me now that I'm thinking about it, in that I don't know that the kinds of discussions that I have with other people at the Zendo, you would say, are about the Dharma necessarily. I mean, certainly we have kind of more formalized Dharma discussions after we sit, and that can be nice to explicitly talk about Buddhism. But I would say that it's what's more valuable to me about that space is the way that we can talk to one another, given maybe these shared experiences that we might have had that are maybe harder to explicitly talk about. Whereas in online spaces, I think there's maybe less value in the way that people tend to talk to each other, and it's maybe more about, I don't know, like finding out the truth than it is about like sharing what you've experienced or listening to what other people have experienced.